Hey everyone, Morning Coffee back again today with another Diablo 4 guide. Today I am focusing on the Barbarian, who I think was one of the more challenging characters to play for a lot of people over the first beta weekend. I think a lot of the challenge comes from the Barbarian having to be in melee range for most of their skills and having almost no option for damage while kiting. However, I'm happy to say that with a little patience and some farming, the Barbarian has numerous really fun builds to play and some of the coolest legendary powers in the game. Whirlwind was the build I wanted to focus on for the first weekend because I knew a lot of you probably enjoy the spin to win gameplay. I was able to defeat all the content with this build, including the Butcher a few times, so the Barbarian's doing pretty well. Alright, so let's take a look at the skill tree. So for my Fury generator, I was using Lunging Strike with the ability to gain some health back when we hit healthy targets, and it also inflicts bleed over 5 seconds. Now the other option up here is gaining Berserking on critical strike for 1.5 seconds, which could potentially be better if Berserking is able to be snapshotted with Whirlwind, but I haven't done enough testing with that. I'm running out of time in the beta, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to keep you posted on that one. Going down the tree, I have 4 points in Whirlwind, with Enhanced Whirlwind and Violent Whirlwind. This one gives us 30% increased damage after 2 seconds of channeling. This is really good overall, though I do think when we get access to higher levels and more points, there are going to be some really cool builds that use the slashing weapon and the bleed damage Whirlwind, so we'll have to see what comes in the future. Next, we put 3 points into Pressure Point, which gives our Whirlwind a 30% chance on lucky hit to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. Whirlwind has a fairly low lucky hit rate, so that's why I put 3 points into Pressure Point. For the next node down, we're using Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry is going to give us resource generation, and it's also going to give movement speed. Both things are really useful for the build, along with getting unstoppable when we cast it. And one of the main things that helps us stay alive with this build, the way that I'm playing it, is over here we get Fortify from it. It's going to give us 10% of our base life as Fortify, and then we're also going to gain Fortify whenever we get hit and whenever we deal damage while we have Rallying Cry up. So this is going to help us stack Fortify. Coming down even further, I get War Cry, which is going to give us increased damage for a short duration. Also gives us Berserking for a short duration. And on top of that, again, it's going to give us 28% of our base life as Fortify. So this is another source for us to generate Fortify. I'm picking up 1 point into Leap. I have done a version of this build where I pick up Enhanced Leap if you really want to get around a little faster. But I found that, honestly, just dropping the point and putting it in Whirlwind was better. Alright, coming down even further, I don't get any of the active skills here. I just pick up passives. I pick up 1 point in Thick Skin, mostly so that we can pick up the 3 points in Defensive Stance. And again, this is giving us 9% damage reduction while fortified, so we're basically using fortified to give us a lot of defense from this. Coming down even further, we pick up 1 point into Wrath of the Berserker, and then 1 point into Wallop, and 1 point into Concussion. Now this is while I'm currently using a two-handed mace. This just gives us some extra CC ability. Also helps us stagger bosses. For example, when I did the goat boss for the stronghold, it was really nice. I was actually able to stagger him, and a lot of that was coming from, well, a little bit coming from the build, but then also a lot coming from this concussion point here as well. So if I was to get a better weapon that wasn't a two-handed mace, I would drop those 2 points and I would put them here. I'd just buff my Wrath of the Berserker for the beta. Alright, so let's talk about the gear for the build, because I'm sure that that's what everyone wants to see, and that's actually where a lot of the power for the Barbarian comes from. The Sorceress is pretty strong without a lot of their legendary powers, and a lot of the Sorceress's legendary powers weren't that exciting, to be honest with you, but it's the opposite for the Barbarian. For the Barbarian, you've got really cool, really exciting, like game-changing styles of play coming from your legendary powers. But at the same time, without those legendary powers, you do feel a bit weaker. It does feel a bit more gear dependent. So I'm just going to run through what I'm currently running. There are some things that I don't have that I would like to have. The main point of which is actually, I can go to the Codex of Power here and I can show you. I do wish that I had this node right here on one of my legendaries. So right here it shows it as Whirlwind critical strike chance increased by 5% for each second it's channeled, up to 20%. Well, if you have a better version of this, it's actually increased by 20% for each second, up to 80%. So you can actually get 80% increased critical strike chance when you've been channeling Whirlwind for over 4 seconds, which is absolutely insane. We really need to get that on the build, but unfortunately, it's the only legendary power that I really, really want that I haven't been able to get yet. All right, so going down the items here, on the helmet, I have the imprinted heal for 3.2 life per second for close enemies, up to 40 life per second. This is just kind of a filler, a little bit of a defensive. I don't have to chug my potion quite as much, but honestly, this could be replaced. It's not super important for the build. Going over here, we have damaging enemies with leap, upheaval, or whirlwind has a 75% chance on a lucky hit to summon an ancient. So this one is super good. We're whirlwinding around. We're going to be summoning our ancient almost every 5 seconds. It's super nice. It's really good. I think it's a core part of this build. Down here, I have critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 26% for 3 seconds. So when we're whirlwinding and we get a critical strike, we're just increasing our attack speed by 26%. It's awesome. This would go really, really well if I had the legendary power that I was talking about so that I could actually have a higher crit rate on my whirlwind, but we don't have that yet. Right down here, we have whirlwinds leave behind dust devils that deal 87% damage to surrounding enemies. It's honestly a lot more lackluster than it sounds. The dust devil idea is pretty cool. The damage on it is honestly just too low for it to be relevant, really. I could honestly see myself replacing this with something else. I don't have anything better right now to put in its place, but the way that the dust devils work is they hit something maybe 1, if you're lucky, 2 ticks, and they don't seem to scale off of anything. So basically they're doing either an extra 87 or an extra like 175 damage. It's not all that impressive, honestly. Missing a legendary power here. This would be my crit strike for whirlwind if I had it. All right, so coming across here, we have skills deal up to 33% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource. From what I've tested, this does snapshot with Whirlwind. So if we start casting Whirlwind at full fury, we will get the full benefit of this until we let go of it. So even if we drop our fury down, I'm still getting 33% increased base damage on my Whirlwind. Over here is 25% increased critical strike chance against injured enemies. And then while we're healthy, we get 50% increased crowd control duration. So our stuns are going to last longer, and our critical strike chance is higher against low health enemies. Coming up here, direct damage against bleeding enemies has up to a 31% chance to stun them for 2 seconds, which is actually pretty cool. So if we're bleeding the enemy, we can stun them. And this one works really well if you can actually use a two-hander so that you can actually apply bleed with Whirlwind. I don't get as much benefit out of it right now, but I was using a two-handed slash for a long time until I got a really good mace. And it was absolutely awesome to be able to just whirlwind through things, apply the bleed to them, and then have a 31% chance to stun them. Like, I was stunning all the time. And down here, stunning a bleeding enemy deals 28% of their bleed amount to them as physical damage. So this really compounds with this. These two, I had these two going when I was running the two-handed slashing, and it was absolutely amazing. I'm still using it right now because we're coming close to the end of the beta, don't have time to really upgrade this stuff, and there's also a chance that I might actually start using the two-handed slasher again if I was to be able to upgrade this thing before the day is over. Down to this one, you gain 0.3% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 30%. So this is kind of like a mid-roll, actually more of a low roll on this one, but it basically just gives me the ability to stack up to 30% extra armor, which is really nice. Whirlwind periodically pulls enemies to you. This one is really, really, really good for farming. I don't think it's necessary, and like you could get by without it, but it's just a really nice quality of life feature to have things pulled to you. You can really group up mobs with it. And then the last skill that I have on here is basic skills, gain attack speed. This one's not super necessary for the build. I could replace it with something else, but there wasn't a whole lot of good options that I had access to at the time. And, you know, anytime that you're getting increased attack speed for your basic skill, we're still casting our basic skill with the build, so it's still good. Now, as far as the gear itself goes, usually what I'm looking for is anything defensive related first, and then after that I'll go for offensive stuff. So like on armor, for example, 3% damage reduction while fortified is huge, because I said we're stacking our ability to fortify really easily with this build. So things like that, anything that's like damage reduction, like here on the chest we've got 2.2% damage reduction. So I stack damage reduction first, and then I work on my offense, and that's just kind of how I always build my characters. And then for the gems in the armor, I think the sapphires are just awesome. The upgraded sapphires give you 5% damage reduction while fortified. So if you get 2 in your chest, get 1 in your helm, and 1 in your pants, you can have 20% damage reduction just from your gems while you're fortified. And like I said, we're going to be fortified all the time with this build. So it's super, super nice to have that damage reduction from that. And as far as offensive stats that we'd be looking for, some of those would be like damage to enemies that are close, damage to enemies that are vulnerable, core skill damage increase, plus skill ranks for Whirlwind. There's a lot of good options out there. Just anything that's going to affect our Whirlwind, basically. When you're actually playing the build, the way that the build plays is basically just running through. When I get to a pack of monsters, I will lunging strike or use whatever fury generator you're using to get to max fury. And then you just cast your Whirlwind. You can cast Rallying Cry and you can cast War Cry on cooldown, or you can save them for a situation where you actually feel like you need them. That's up to you. I usually just use them on cooldown. Like I get a big group of monsters, I'm hitting Rallying Cry and hitting War Cry. Now, Wrath of the Berserker, I usually save for things like multiple elites or bosses. I don't necessarily use it on cooldown because it is such a long cooldown, but it is super useful to have. It's that nice extra bit of damage. Just make sure that if you do use Wrath of the Berserker, you are using your whatever your fury generator is once every 5 seconds to extend its duration to the max possible duration for it. But other than that, it's super simple to play. And if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. And if you like the content, I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe on the video. And I hope to catch you guys on the next build.